In a world cloaked in shadows where the line between reality and myth blurs, four intrepid adventurers stand at the precipice of destiny. Welcome to the realm of the Red Sphere Guild. Welcome to the channel and welcome to session 3 of the Sphere of the Red Guild. Previous story so far, our four adventurers have found now 2 spheres of the 9 that they know that they need to capture, and as a result they're looking for the remaining spheres. They don't know where the divine sphere is or the demonic sphere, but they know that this is going to be important. Marina back in Baug is looking into the information as her father, Lord Vish, is desperately trying to regate the city from the military control that's taken over it. However, they've been given a small bit of information, and that's that the island of Samora might be the place that they can find the water sphere that the mermaids held. They decided that their ship, the Mariner, would be the one for them, and as a result, with a fleshed out crew, they decided to go into the city itself. However, bad things struck. As they hit rocks, the Mariner itself sank, casting all of our 4 adventurers into the sea. They finally woke up on a small island. It looked volcanic in nature, and as a result they had to make their way through, desperately trying to find food and water. They didn't have any weapons. They found a cutlass and a sling and a few rags, hoping that this would make them through. As they got to the north of the island, they found a very small boat. Within this boat they decided to sail into another island. An island that didn't help them all that much, but interestingly there was a shrine there. A shrine that held another stone piece of information with demonic wording on it and a awful picture of a demon, and once again that symbol. They couldn't translate it. They needed Marina. Marina wasn't with them, but they knew that this was important, so they took it with them. As they hopefully searched further and further, they found a second stone, a far more detailed stone, and this stone was clearly important too. They didn't really understand how there were 9 spheres, 9 realms, even though there were 8 realms of man. Maybe the centaurs owned one, but then who took the final one? It didn't make sense to have only 8 species, but 9 stones. As a result, they decided to move further, and they finally got the attention of some pirates. The pirates took them on, and they were fairly low down in their structure. However, they decided, yeah, this could help us. This could get us somewhere that they needed to go. The pirates themselves decided to move slowly across some islands and find plunder where they could. They came across 2 small towns, and within there, it wasn't exactly the type of place to leave the pirate hold, so they decided to keep going. However, as they got right to the end, it was obvious that something wasn't quite right. The pirates themselves were fighting against other pirates. These pirates had to fight tooth and nail. There was even some type of creature that came out of the sea itself. Claws and tentacles pulling down a ship. They knew that they were somehow sailing directly into a war, or maybe at the very least they were going through a blockade. But it didn't matter, because they did enough in order to seek passage from the pirates and be dropped off in Samora itself. Samora was an interesting island, an island that didn't have much in the way of people on it. They decided to search, and as a result they knew that there was some information that they found. They found information that regarded themselves as monsters. They found some information pointing them to different locations, and they found a weird key. Within this weird key, within a weird cave, they decided to see what was inside, and they found a chaotic cathedral. A cathedral filled with monsters to the brim, and as they deeped straight into this, they found within the bottom layer the blue sphere. And it was this blue sphere that wasn't going to help them exactly, but at the very least they knew that the mermaids aren't still around, still holding it, still dealing with the centaurs. As they got back to their coastal islands, they found another ship, a ship that, yeah, maybe would work. It was small, considerably smaller than the previous one. However, it had a small chapel on board as well, and as a result it could be a perfect place to move forward. As they got back to Samora, they did get some other interesting relics too. One was a weird scroll, a scroll that had writing on it, once again, unfamiliar to them. This one was still not Dwarven, it wasn't the demonic font either, Maybe it was the lizard men? They weren't really sure. As they got speaking with Marina, though, it appeared she had done a lot of work in their stead. They found that the possible life sphere was based somewhat in the last giant enclave to the west. They knew this was a really interesting place to go, and something that, whilst wasn't often travelled, they felt could be a really good lead. After all, the giants themselves were only in that one place. If they truly did still have the sphere, this was the place for it. The Bolg mines, now freshly allied with Lord Vish, said that they think the runic sphere might be further north, up into the old mines of Moranth. The old king used to own absolutely everything, and as a result, he would be the one to own it. There was some type of plague that took absolutely everything out. No one likes to speak about it, even the dwarves themselves, and so they're not exactly sure what you'll find there, but that could be an interesting place. The lizard men themselves actually reached out to Marina. It appears northwest of the spires, they held the Earth sphere and they were willing to give it to them. There were no word from the elves, but they almost felt that the elves themselves, now that they have their own city, were probably owning this. But the last two spheres were interesting. Marina was sure that surely the centaurs had won. It could have been the divine. After all, they were meant to be divine. However, they didn't exactly know where it was. They gained some new tools, specifically from the pirates themselves, in favour for one last mission for the pirates. They needed to go to the eastern seaboard and take over a port, and they did exactly that. But this gave them somewhat of an inlet into the eastern side of the world. They knew that if they kept on going further up and further up, they would eventually find the lizard men, and maybe, just maybe, they might be able to get the life sphere. They decided to set up a camp as they were going north, but something didn't feel right. They felt they were being watched, that something was there, that there was something hanging around. But they continued north. They slowly made their way through the flooded plains, and it was here in which they finally found Luke's superior, and they wondered maybe something was going on. And on the third day, they came across a mountain range. Within that mountain range itself, up onto the peak, they saw it, a shadow of a centaur. They made their way round the mountains in order to try and gain access to them, but they couldn't find access at all. So eventually they had to just carry on their journey, moving further and further to try and get to the giants themselves. They found an abandoned hamlet. It wasn't very helpful, and they finally got over to the giants' village. It was here that they found mountainous buildings, obviously holding giants, but they also found one small building, human-sized in nature. It seemed completely out of place. It seemed new. Something here wasn't exactly right. The giants themselves weren't particularly a chatty bunch, but they did say a few things. The first one was, "We told give pretty glass to you." And so they were given the Earth sphere itself. The life sphere itself. But who told them to give it to you? It didn't make sense. And they also were told, "We there when you need." Also, this. They were given a small pan flute. It was very, very small. No giant could ever play this thing. It was quite clear that someone had been here first. Someone had told them to build a building. Someone had told them to be given the sphere. Someone had been told to give them this flute. Who? Was it the centaurs? It made no sense. What was particularly interesting about this flute, though, is it was missing one of the spheres, the demonic sphere. It appeared that everything else was there, but not the demonic. They decided it was time to go home, though. After all, they gained some more information. They knew Maria needed to look into it, and maybe they could find the runic sphere further north. As they moved back into the world of Balg, they were once again brought in order to take on the castle, and they did exactly that. And it was here, with the dwarves' help, that they were given a small piece of information. Urthel was taken to a side and he was spoken to, without the rest of our adventurers knowing what was told to him. And he came back saying, "We need to go north. We need to find that runic sphere." So that's exactly what they did. As they moved north through the ice fields and through the snowy-capped mountains, through massive caverns filled of crystals with powers similar to the sphere itself, they felt something wasn't quite right here. Why did the dwarves just stop? There were no dwarven bodies, there were no monsters. Something was going on. So they decided to go north up to Moranth. Moranth was a small town. It was somewhat buried by the mountain itself. After all, the dwarves had been missing for over 200 years as the information from them disappeared completely overnight. They found many dwarven bodies, but they also found monsters. Thousands of monsters. It was quite clear that the dwarves weren't able to take them all themselves. However, somehow they'd taken the mountain down on top of them. Somehow they'd given themselves up in order to keep something clear. This is where they found the king himself. The king had written a letter in dwarven font that Urtha was able to read, and with it they found a small chisel, the royal chisel, and on it there were runes carved right into the tip, glowing, and next to it the sphere itself, cracked in two. Urtha had told us that the information within was quite simple. The king had built up an army bigger than anyone else's, and he knew that he could take on anyone, but he was happy to just mine away and hope with the dwarves that they would go with a peaceful life. However, someone else wasn't so happy. The demons themselves had come out of the woodwork, come out of the mountain in order to gain to them, and the dwarven king knew that there was only one thing that they wanted, the sphere. And so, with his last act, he decided to take the royal chisel, put it to the glass, and smash the sphere. It cracked in two, and with it, the mountain came down on top of them. The last stand of the Dwarven Empire. We were overjoyed to find the runic sphere after all. However, there was something not quite right about the story that they heard previously. As Urthor went back, he handed over the information towards Balg, and there was something else. He knew that by finding this, he cleared the dwarven name. The dwarves rejoiced within the streets, claiming Urthor as somewhat of a hero. But before they could think about anything else, they knew, even though they had 5 of the 9 spheres, they needed something else. They needed all the spheres, and they only had 2 more leads, the Earth and the Arcane. So they wondered what to do, but they decided that with Aethys going over the Earth sphere, it could be worthwhile going far after him. As they started to go after him, they got a message from Marina. Apparently, Urthor had failed to communicate with them. He had gone so far and found absolutely nothing. Suddenly he'd gone dead, as if, truly, he was dead himself. As they got through the spires, they found Drexos, a Chaos Warden that was less than helpful as a guide, and as a result they did get lost within the spheres themselves numerous times. However, they did find a small city, quite happy with everyone on board, quite happy to help people out, but they had no idea what the sphere was about at all. They had never heard of Aethys, they knew absolutely nothing. But the adventurers, knowing that they needed to find Aethys, decided to carry on into a tunnel system, moving further and further and deeper towards where they needed to go. It was here that they found a massive underground city, and within this there were steps and castles, and someone had clearly cleared something out of the undergrowth. They knew something was going on. They finally moved their way through this city, and they finally came to a massive chamber, and as they entered, the door behind them closed. Someone called over the top, "Our final combatants! As always, the rules are simple. Survive 3 rounds and you will have an audience with the king." Somehow they had willingly become fighters in some type of gladiatorial combat. They decided to fight, and they fought well. They fought and they won, and they fought and they won. What was interesting though is all of the winners of this particular gladiatorial battle would finally meet up, and they found out that there were 2 winners. It was themselves and one other. As they met this person, they realised who it was. Aethys. They had finally made up with their mate, the leader of the Yellow Sphere Guild, and here, without doubt, they knew that they were going to do something. Aethys said, I had a plan. Leave me to speak with the king. You can ask your questions second, I promise." And so, when they went up to the king themselves, they asked a question. "We seek the words to close the portal." They spoke with him themselves for a while, working at what was exactly going on, but it was here that they decided to give them something. First of all, they gave them a small pebble and the word Varus, and then the king simply walked away. The rest of the group came together and said, "What about our question? What can we look for?" And they were handed the sphere of Earth itself. No question was needed. They knew exactly what they wanted to. However, Athos, more than happy, quite happily pulled everyone together and said, "I know exactly where we're going. The abandoned town of Varus. It's not a person, it's a place. And within this place, there is a small portal, a small pedestal of water that they were able to drop the pebble in, and within this, any question could be answered." Athos went through and he threw his little pebble in and he asked what were the words, and they came across the water surface itself. Funny enough, they recognized the words. These words were the words that were in that weird scroll that they gained, that weird language that they had no understanding of what it might be. It matched perfectly, but at the very least now they knew the words they needed to speak, the words that will allow them to close the portal. Even though Athos' journey has resulted in the Earth sphere, and they were able to get these words, it was somewhat of a heroic experience, shall we say, and as a result he decided to go back to the Yellow Sphere in the desert lands. This left these guys with only one more lead, and that was the Arcane Sphere. The Arcane Sphere that had apparently been given to the elves themselves. They knew that the elves were in a city further south, however they didn't get on with dwarves, and as a result Arthur decided to stay behind. He decided to do something completely different. They didn't say exactly what, but they were more than happy to leave Arthur and take on instead just the three of them. They finally made their way down to Ashwy. Ashwy was a major city. However, it was broken up into a series of different blocks. There were the Black Bob's crew, a vicious group of people. The Elven Quarter itself, of course. There was a few other emmets and some lands and some city councils. There were also some guards from Vin, and there were some unclaimed spaces of the city as well that odd things happened in. However, the Elven Quarter itself was, without a doubt, the most dangerous. The city had a name for the Elven Quarter, Sasselin. It was actually a offensive term to the elves. However, they were quite happy referring to them themselves as Sasselin, as a series of different factions decided to fight over the lands itself. 4 different factions: a brutal baron, a delusional duke, and a vicious viscount, and then an excellent as well. As they moved through the city, they realised that there was information that they could gain here. There was information that would help them, but specifically, they met up with the Baron himself. The Baron says that there's definitely something here. There's an orb for sure. He knows exactly where it is, and all they need to do is help him, and he'll tell them exactly where it was. So, first of all, they were tasked to go deep into the ground, deep into a massive part, the east of the block, and as a result they were meant to get to the Excellent and take him out. It was interesting because as they moved through, they heard stories of exactly what this man was for, exactly what this man did, and they were more than happy to help. However, it was the second query that was quite interesting. They were asked to go into the city beneath. They were asked to group up with the 2 different feed skills that were based down there, the Platinum Core and the Ogrol, and they were to go up again and take out another leader. It was quite clear that the Baron himself was going to take off absolutely everyone. He was going to own this quarter. What was particularly interesting though was he was now planning to take out the vicious Viscount. The Viscount was meant to be his ally. However, they did exactly that and they made their way through, and it was these guilds down in the city beneath that really understood the adventurers. They understood exactly how great they were running. As a result, they offered to do absolutely everything they could to help them find the sphere, and they would be there as well when they needed some type of defense to take on the armies. It was the third mission of the Baron that they really started to think second. The Baron, knowing that he'd already taken out 2 of the previous owners of the different parts of the quarter, was only had one person left to take out, the delusional Duke. And he was known as being somewhat of a bubbling fool, but he was somewhat harmless anyway, at least that was the word on the street. He had run and he had gone back to his native plains of the Oren. However, it was here that there was an interesting information that they found. As they made their way through Oren, no one obscured them, no one stopped them at all. And it wasn't until they got to the bank, when apparently they were meant to be taking all of the Duke's money, that they were instead offered an alternative. His elven scribe would fully translate any scrolls that they would read. They would tell you how to speak the words. They knew how they were written, but not how they were spoken. And in return, he asked to be robbed. How weird. It was here that they had some hushed conversations and they knew exactly what was going on. And so, they went back to the city with all the money they possibly could. 2,000 gold pieces heavier. Wow, this was going to be great. They spoke to the Baron and the Baron said, "Fantastic. I've heard news that the Duke himself is going to be back into the city and he is going to try and take us on." The Baron said, "I need you to do one last thing. I need you to take your way through these tunnels, go across the river itself, and I want you to take the Duke out yourself." The adventurers said, "Sure, that's exactly what we'll do." So they went all the way down to the Duke, they met up with him, and they made an alliance. And instead, they took the Duke all the way directly to the Baron himself, where the Duke could take on the Baron one-on-one, and in a delicious fight, the Duke himself won. The city's guard, realizing they knew exactly what was going on, realizing the Duke had far more power than he let people on, this man wasn't a bumbling fool at all, it was quite obvious, finally said, "The Baron will be disrupted, the Baron's men will be broken apart, and in return I will offer you the thing that you seek. I will offer you the sphere." And so it's here that he got the sphere, and once again they completed their journey to get all the rumours they possibly could. But there were still 2 spheres left. 2 spheres that they had no idea of where they were. The divine sphere and the demonic sphere. Now, Volar nipped back to the city to buy some herbs, to get through the flooded tunnels and to hopefully do some things, but they had a rumour from Marina herself. There was a series of islands called the Crater Islands in the Purple Sea, and under there was a massive underwater temple. Once upon a time, this temple complex had been on the surface itself, but the centaurs had submerged it on purpose. Maybe they were trying to hide something. Maybe this is where they hid their sphere. Maybe there was a divine. They hoped so, at least. And so they decided, without further ado, to go to the Crater Islands and see what they could find. This is where we'll end this session. I hope to see you next time for the final journey of the Guild of the Red Sphere.